Cool. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is the Autodesk Vision Series, and in this session, we're going to take a look at the future of editorial. So a quick note on the people behind some of this thinking. So I'm Gordon. I've been on the Maya team for 15 years, and I'm currently the architect for film.
My name's Don Parker. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Shotgun Software Production Management Collaboration System. Been doing this for about 12 years.
Very cool. And we've also been working with our friends on the finishing side. So Steve is running a little late. Hopefully he'll join us in a bit, but he's definitely been part of the thinking behind this. So it's an amazing time to be creating stories, whether they're feature films or commercials, whether they're live action or full CG or anything in between. You know, we're able to create and edit more content more easily than ever before. Advances in technologies and production techniques are letting us create experiences for our users that they've never seen before. But the thing that's common to all of those things is the story. And importantly for us, it's the story and the creative editorial process around it, which brings together this amazingly talented group of artists and creative people to build these experiences. And so obviously when we think of editorial, we're going to think of kind of the traditional creative editorial tools we have today. You know, those things are going to continue to evolve. They're going to be awesome. But I think the thing that really excites us around editorial is, you know, how do we bring these talented teams together around the editorial process in a way that lets them be creative, lets them collaborate, and lets them iterate easily to explore new ideas. And so that's the stuff we're going to be looking at for the next 20 minutes or so. So I mentioned it was an exciting time. What are some of the trends that are kind of leading it to be such an exciting time, and what does that mean for editorial? And so when we look at film production, our process is evolving. And we're seeing, you know, the lines between pre-production and post-production and production starting to blur, and in some cases starting to break with things like, you know, pre-vising and virtual production. And this is bringing a lot of the things which were traditionally post-activities kind of forward in the creative process, which does a few things. It enables people to make informed creative decisions earlier and hence more cheaply than they've ever been able to do before, which allows them to iterate. But it is also creating collaboration that we haven't seen before. So we're getting people who have traditionally been at the end of the pipe, and they're coming forward now and starting to work with the teams doing the previs. They're starting to work with the teams doing production. And even at this conference, we've seen a bunch of great talks of how that's starting to inform the way those teams work and the way together all of those teams collaborate around the story. And editorial's right in the middle of this change. So, you know, historically that was a process that kind of sat at the end of the pipe. It was kind of a small group of creative people who would kind of ingest the content from everyone else, oftentimes after the lion's share of your budget and your time had been spent, which kind of limited sometimes what you could do. And that's been changing, right? Now we see editorial much more as a parallel iteration where at the same time you're iterating on the story, you've got your content teams of hundreds or even thousands of people iterating on the content, which is super exciting, right? It allows us to explore ideas and have creative options we haven't had before. But again, it's driving that collaboration. So we're starting to see, you know, the previs teams working with the directors on creative and story decisions. We're starting to see teams in animation working with the story teams on shot reordering and timing. And that's driving a lot more collaboration in the editorial and storytelling process that we've had before. But it's not just the process that's changing. There's a bunch of things happening on the technology side which are in some cases kind of supporting those changes and in other cases really compounding them. So if you look at capture, you know, we've obviously been shooting audio and video for a long time, but we can capture those things today at a resolution, a frame rate, and a dynamic range that we've never had before. And more than that, those cameras never stop rolling, and in some cases there's multiple cameras on the set. We're getting hundreds of hours of footage coming out of the shoot now. And it's not just audio and video. We're getting depth, we're getting motion, we're getting camera, we're getting set capture, we're getting lighting, we're getting environments, we're getting a whole bunch of data coming off the set. And those things are all little computers themselves. And so they're coming with a whole bunch of metadata that they didn't have before, which gives us the opportunity to sew that together and get a whole bunch more value out of it and open up creative options we haven't had open to us before. We're also, you know, everyone in the production process is pretty much walking around with a Cray 2 supercomputer in their pocket. But more than that, it's a connected computer with a whole bunch of sensors and cameras on it. And so, this enables kind of a much more connected workflow across all of production. B, it's starting to drive some of the traditionally analog or hard copy processes across to a more digital workflow. But C, it's also kind of getting, again, more collaboration across departments, because you've now got people like wardrobe who are taking photos on their iPhones or mobile devices of what the costumes look like that can now be hooked right up to the production database and leveraged in other departments. You've got the people doing the continuity on set doing work. All that stuff now can be put back together and can open up a lot more options downstream and a lot more collaborative workflows across the other departments. The final thing we're seeing is distribution. Now, we've had distribution at kind of our studio level with outsourcing and kind of global studios for a while, and that trend is probably not slowing down. But we're adding to that kind of distributed data and distributed compute, and just a scale that's just growing, year over year. And all that is letting us bring to these problems kind of a more parallel creative effort than we've ever been able to bring to them before. So it's when you look at all these trends together, we're seeing bigger teams, we're seeing more collaboration, we're seeing more iteration and the connection across the different departments than we've ever had before. So a very exciting time, but as Dom will share with you, there's definitely some challenges when we look at how we get the most out of that for our artists.
Gordon talks about the exciting new stuff, and he asked me to talk about the challenges. I don't think that's very fair. There are some challenges. Simple things can sometimes be hard. And Gordon, how do you pronounce this? That top part? How would you say
That's
that?
why I gave you this slide.
All right, yeah. Simple things like working in context. You're an artist working on a shot, and you just want to see the shots on the other side. You want to know what your other artists are doing and if there's been any changes in the cut. That seems so simple, but it's hard. It's hard if you don't have that. Knowing what's changed, whether you're a supervisor or an artist, there's constant change happening in editorial throughout the pipeline. Just knowing what happened and if it affects you is hard. Matching video to audio, if you're an animator and you're working on lip sync and your audio switches, or you're doing some animation next to an effect that changes, a sound effect that changes, knowing that changed so you can change your work is important. And if you can't find that out, that sucks. It's hard. And really just viewing the cut, being able to look at the latest version of the project, not just the vision from editorial, but also all the latest iterations from all the artists working on the project without having to go into an editorial suite. That should be easy, but it's sometimes very hard. And that's hard inside a single studio. It gets harder if we cross multiple time zones, geos, pipelines. So many horror stories that we hear about cases where people are trying to move stuff back and forth because they haven't really figured out good ways to do that. We were in London recently talking to a big effects client of ours, and on a huge tentpole movie, they were literally getting a QuickTime movie for a whole reel from editorial, and they had to spend almost 3 days like eye-matching and figuring out all the things that changed. Meanwhile, artists are out there working on things that maybe they don't have to. That sucks. How do you say that again? How do you pronounce that? Whatever that is. Also, on top of all this, deadlines are shrinking, budgets are shrinking, so we're asked to do more with less time, which is motivating a lot of parallel work. But as creative people, we want to spend all of our time being creative, not dealing with all the logistics that all these challenges present to us. So there are a lot of challenges. But don't despair. We have a vision for the future. The vision as we see it is one, everyone needs to be able to work in context. No matter what your work is, everyone needs to be able to work in context of the whole project as it's changing every single day. This is true across tools and across apps, and everyone should be able to make really good, informed, creative decisions, or just decisions on what you're going to spend your next 10 minutes doing because you understand the context that you work in. 2, everybody working together, so not only knowing, being able to send changes back and forth, but also being able to collaborate about those changes, being able to discuss those changes, understand what the changes may mean for production, and move forward. I mean, I think the ideal pipeline is one that can accommodate change rapidly and easily, and we need to be able to work together around editorial change to do that. And then finally, being able to take control of the process, design a pipeline that allows us to think about how we're going to track this information, what type of automation we're going to put in place to reduce the amount of time it takes humans to do things, where computers should be doing things so we can be as creative as possible. So our vision is to move the needle a lot across all 3 of these in the future. And we've been working on some of this. We've been thinking through this a bit, and I think what we're going to do next is Gordon's going to show some stuff, and then I'm going to show some stuff that we hope will move the needle forward.
Thank you. So let's take a look at work in context and work together and what that might mean to kind of an animation workflow, which is what I spend most of my time looking at least over the last few years. So here's a typical animation package. A lot of you guys use storyboards. We kind of use storyboards as well to explore some of these ideas. So I've got my shot cam up in the top corner with the 127. I've got my working camera. I've got a nice NLE environment. My shot cam there has got a timeline under it. I can kind of scroll back and forward and see the different frames in my shot. And I can go in and do some cool animation of this dude here. And this is where a lot of the off-the-shelf software leaves you today. You're a bit of an island. You're working on your shot. And you've got to kind of go out and find everything else yourself, or maybe even just send it into the void and see what comes back when you get it. When we talk about being kind of connected and collaborative in this editorial workflow, we started looking at, well, how could we make that better? How could we kind of help you connect to all the other things in the pipeline, all the other things that people have contributed to that shot? And so we said, wouldn't it be cool if I could come in now and access all of those other layers of that shot? So in this case, I'm going to take a look at the storyboards, right? I want to go back to the storyboards and just check, did I kind of hit the key moments that I was looking for? And I can bring that in where the artist is working. So it's synced up to my timeline, it's in my application, and it's kind of connected to all the other things I'm doing. And I can kind of flick back and forward and check, did I hit the pose? Am I doing well? And so we're showing storyboard here, but that could be anything. That could be previs work. It could be the live action for it. It could be some director's notes. It could be review comments that you've had from someone else. And obviously we're showing them here just flicking back and forward, but we could blend between them. We can give the artist a bunch of different ways to connect that to really make sure they've got access to all of the information around that shot, so they can kind of collaborate where they're working with the rest of the team. So that's kind of cool. So now we've got a shot that looks good, but that's obviously only a part of our context, right? There's a much bigger production that this fits into. And so, right now I'm still guessing about, well, do I have motion continuity? Do I have set continuity? Do I have lighting continuity? Do I have the right model in here? Like, there's a lot of things that can still go wrong. And I obviously still can't get a sense of the story as it evolves here. And the boundaries may not be as simple as, hey, this is Joe next to me who's working on the shot after me, right? These might be a cut between CG and live action. They might be a cut between different studios, right? And so quite often it's very, very hard to know what's next to the thing I'm working on. And even if you do know it, how do you get the right version of it? How do you get the approved version of it? So wouldn't it be cool if we can come in now and say, okay, I would like to expand my timeline. Like, show me the full story here. And it's going to connect to this editorial system, kind of pull down the latest versions of all the things around you in whichever format you've chosen. Do you want to look at storyboards? Do you want to look at previews? Do you want to look at the latest checked-in version, the latest approved version? Kind of pick what you want to look at. And now I can kind of play through. Before I've had to do a play blast and submit off to, my supervisor, I can check as I'm working, how is this looking in the story? And you can fix a lot of things. You can get a great feel for where the story's going, and you can kind of understand how this is going to fit in to the bigger project that everyone's working around. So now it's kind of cool. I've looked at this shot, but I can go further now, and I can say, okay, I want to actually work in this context. Right now that I've got this greater context to me, whenever I go off the end of the timeline, I want to be able to see what's there, right? And so I can now animate live on top of this contextual view of, maybe it's the sequence I'm working on, but there's nothing to stop you bringing in the whole movie if you want. So you can pick what you want to bring in, you can pick which versions you want to bring them in as, and then you can work on top of it. So that's kind of cool, but obviously we talked a lot earlier about this being a very iterative and collaborative process. So it's not just me working on this film or commercial. There's a whole team of other people, maybe even other studios working on it. Editorial might be pushing new cuts down. Things are changing here. And I might be kind of deep in my work for an hour or maybe a day. Because we're connected to this editorial system now, we can let you know when things are changing. So a little dialogue can pop up and say, hey, something's changed in shot 2. Do you want to bring that down? And it's going to be an artist's choice. You can choose, do you want to update it, or are you kind of happy with what it is? You can probably get some information on, well, what is that cut? What is that change? And see if you want to bring it down. But you're now kind of hooked into what's happening around you. not just in your studio, not just in your department, but across the whole production. And so right now we've got kind of the context of the shot. We've got the context of the timeline, the production we're working on. But we hinted earlier at, some of the collaboration that's happening around editorial, where, we're already seeing, particularly in feature animation, and I think this trend is going to continue, people in animation are starting to work with the story department more and more to say, hey, I want to do some simple shot reordering and retiming. And so we've got that context in here, right? So the artist can now come in and drag these around and kind of change the ins and outs or change some shots around. And they can submit that back into the system and say, well, here's this story change we talked about. Now, obviously, in a lot of productions, that's something that is maybe not something they want to allow to happen. And so we can definitely support policies on top of this that maybe it's not allowed at all, or maybe that has to go back through creative editorial to get approved. Like, there's a lot of things we can do on top of it. But the really exciting thing is, at a technology level, there's nothing that makes this any less real of an edit than anything else that's happened in kind of a traditional creative editorial application. And so as pipelines evolve, the technology is going to support some really, really exciting things. And as I say, I think these things are just going to get more collaborative over time. So I'll pass back to Don. He can walk you through the shotgun side of that.
Okay. Those designs are really, they resonate with us. We've been talking to artists a lot lately, and they don't want to leave context. They want to stay in their creative tool all the time. So I think putting editorial information about their context in their creative tool is really compelling. We've been thinking about this from a slightly different angle on the Shotgun team. We've been thinking about this in the form of a review system, a system that everyone in production has available to them, and they can see the big picture and then drill into various contexts. So I think the first step, of course, is getting the cut information into Shotgun in the first place. We've been thinking about that. There's a lot of interesting new discussions happening about new file formats and ways, I think, to move some of this information around. And we're participating in those discussions. You can count on us investing in furthering the technology there. We definitely want to make sure that we can pull information out of the various tools, either their pipeline tools, creative tools, or creative editorial tools. And not just get the information in to Shotgun easily, but also get it out, so we can help facilitate moving things around from one place to the next. Although we envision this being beautiful and simple and automated with a couple easy buttons and that's it in the right spots, we've also been thinking about some of our first steps that we'll take, and a lot of our customers today have to deal with not so nice situations where maybe they only get a EDL. That's the only thing they have to work with. So certainly we have to figure out how to take a CDL and parse it, or maybe it's another file format, and parse it, understand it, and then compare it to a previous version of the cut. So in this case, I've selected, this is a new version of the sequence. The system then should tell me, well, what changed? I think that's something that not everybody knows. Sometimes not even the editor knows. Certainly the edit assistants that we work with don't always know what just happened. And so being able, before publish, being able to help diff the difference between two cuts and let everyone know what's happened. In this case, we dropped shots, we added shots, some of the frames changed. All of this has the potential to create chaos in the next step. But understanding what just changed is an important piece. And then being able to share it, be able to publish it. Publish it in the system, and also provide notifications and context via email, let people know what just happened. So there needs to be some sort of import like this happening. But also, it sometimes gets even worse. Sometimes our clients, they only get a QuickTime. Like, they don't even get an EDL, or maybe it's a stack of PDFs coming out of a FileMaker database. So we want to be able to come to the rescue in that case too. So we've been thinking about this, and now that RV is a part of Shotgun, which is a native image and sequence player, wouldn't it be cool if you could just bring the QuickTime in, and as you're looking at it, right inside the system, it's kind of subtle, but see on the timeline, you can just do markers like, here's shot markers. These are updates, these are new shots, this is existing shots. So I have to do it manually, but I'm doing it while looking at the picture in context, the movie, not doing it separately in a database while scrubbing through a QuickTime, and then being able to publish into the system. So that's something we're thinking a lot about, and we're running through various scenarios, and we want, first step in making sure everyone can see the information is getting into Shotgun in the first place. Okay, so it's in here. you have a system, a review system that everyone can access, either in a browser or on the desktop. And this allows me to look at all the work and all the projects that we have. What are some cool views that we can provide? We've been thinking it would be great if you could zoom out and really see the whole project at any time with the latest version of the cut and on the latest versions of iterations from all the artists, probably with some filtering in place. We're inspired by the Photos app on your iPhone, for instance. You can zoom way out and zoom in. So if you're working on a big feature film, maybe this is divided by sequence, maybe it's just one block like this. If you're working on commercials, it can be broken into different spots. But it's just like the global view. And it's not just a view, but it's also navigation. Like, what if you could hover through here, look for something in particular, in this case, a shot, and then zoom right in. So now I'm looking at a particular shot. And in this case, I got to it from a global context, but I could have gotten to this shot, this iteration of a shot, from a lot of other places. You know, maybe it was just a random playlist that was put together, or a chronological list of things that artists have been submitting into the system. So I'm here. So I'm in this window in the world. I want to be able to quickly expand and look at this shot in context of the cut. And there's this little scissor icon down there. We would accept suggestions for better icons besides that. But I'm looking at this shot. If I can, probably via a keyboard shortcut, or I click it with a mouse, I can click that and notice the timeline. We just loaded a bunch of other media on either side. So without doing anything, literally just with a keystroke, I brought in the latest versions of the latest shots on either side based on the latest cut. And we've been thinking about preferences that users could set to decide how many shots to bring in and what departments we want to bring in. Now, I probably want to see a shelf, so I probably want to open up a lower shelf and see the actual context. And there's a bunch of things going on that we're exploring here, but no matter how I got to this shot, I can see its context. On the far left, we're exploring, how we describe where you are in the system. What if there's multiple cuts? What if a shot is in both a sequence and a trailer, or a shot's in a 15 and 30? How do you jump between those? So we're thinking through that. In the middle, we're thinking through the idea of a mini cut, which is bookending what you saw, maybe be 1, 2, or 3 shots. This should include non-effect shots if you're working on an effects project, and maybe as a studio you're not doing the previous shot, it's just dialogue, but you do need to see it in context. That needs to be supported, versus looking at the entire cut. And on the right is filtering. We know this from production. You don't always want the latest versions of the shots from all the departments, because sometimes you have lighting department like rendering off some stuff, doing some things, and it clutters up your cut. So a lot of control here in what you see, preferences that persist, and I can interact with this timeline. I did this really quick. Now I'm looking at this one shot in context of the cut. You should be able to flip back in time. So at any moment, we explored lots of different UIs for this, but at any moment, no matter what you're looking at the top of the stack, you can quickly right-click and see the full stack, the full iterations from any artist working on that shot, all the way back to the original plates, if it's in a visual effects project, or the storyboards if it's animation. Should also be able to do this right on top of the image itself without having the drawer open. So quick navigation, quick ways to expand what I'm looking at. So I want to go wide and I want to go deep, and then I want to come back really quickly. So here's another workflow that we've been thinking a lot about. It's probably familiar to a lot of you. It's, we're in dailies, so this is a playlist. And it's a playlist of stuff that we need to look at, but certainly they're not related to the cut necessarily. They're just brought in. Maybe this is animation or comp dailies. And this is the stuff we have to get through today. Well, what do you want to see when you're looking at the work in the screening room? Or if you're a supervisor at your desk, you want to see it in context of the cut, right? So even though I have to go through these 6 shots really quickly, I want to look at that, flip it to the cut, scrub it back and forth. We have planned tools for annotation and notes, and then go back to my playlist. So we think this should be easy and slick and fast, no matter, to see the whole project, to drill in once you're in, to go wide and go up and down on the desktop. So we're working through how these UIs should work and the flows should work in the browser, on the desktop, and on mobile devices. And then by hooking up with the Maya team and other creative application teams, are thinking about how these tools can also show up inside of those tools in context for the artist. So what's the future of editorial for us? Well, you should be able to work in context easily, work together smoothly, and take control of the process. Essentially all work in harmony. And that's our thoughts. Thank you so much. This is us. All of our teams have been doing a lot of thinking about this, and there's so much that we had to cut out to get through some high-level stuff. So if you guys are interested and passionate about anything that we talked about, please come and talk to us. Thank you. We have time for questions. Should we do questions?
Sure.
Anybody have any questions? Comments? Do you believe what we said? Did we get the problems right? The challenges part right? You guys dealing with any frustrations we didn't talk about?
I think so. I think you guys are totally on the path. We're doing episodic, so our timelines are extremely stressed, and it's very important to go from animatics to previs and actually see how it totally changes across the board over time. And we're developing our own EDL injecting that we can actually pass it. It would be interesting to know when you guys will have it out so that it can actually be used.
Okay.
If there's like a rough timeline.
Sure. For the stuff that I showed on our team, we're starting to work on it in October. So we showed a much bigger version of this at our user group meeting yesterday, and we're spending the next 8 weeks running around showing what we're thinking to our customers and getting feedback, and then we're going to dive in. So we're not sure how long phase one is going to take us. We like to go in quick iterations, but it's time. Time is now. So, but we see this as a multi-year project. I mean, this is going to be a big initiative. But phase one will absolutely have some sort of parsing. So we can maybe hook up afterwards and have my team running through some details, if you like.
Yeah, it's definitely an area we're looking at. As you saw from the Maya stuff, it's still storyboards. So it's stuff we're exploring. And I think if you've got an interest in seeing any of that, or you've got ideas on how you'd like it to work, I would love to hear from you. So drop us a line, because it all helps support people kind of investing even more in it.
It's easy to change things now when they're pixels than later when it's bits software. Any other thoughts, comments? Henry, are we doing the right thing here?
Awesome.
Right. You've built systems like this in the past. Should we keep torturing them, or should we let them go?
I think they've done well.
Okay. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good rest of the show.
Cheers.